everybody, and welcome to Beyond Politics. Today we'll be talking about the state of the nation. Well,
Finances.
more specifically, what we need, I think everyone can agree, no matter what your political orientation, we can all agree that we need South Africa to be a strong state. The state itself, it needs to be strong, but that's not the case right now. And
Not large, strong.
Yeah, strong. Especially when you have global organizations threatening the sovereignty of nations, especially nations that are rich in minerals, it becomes a very difficult thing to do. Right now, there's a G20 summit happening in South Africa, and we're going to still do a video on that one, exposing all the dirty little secrets and nitty details. It's gross, it's horrible, the things that they are saying.
The globally leaked.
And we'll go into that, but in a brief summary, the G20 summit is trying to figure out how in 5 years we can align more strongly with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And
Agenda 2030.
it's basically an agenda of population control, but we'll go into that. Tying into that is the lack of strength of our country and the lack of sound economic policy within South Africa. So unfortunately, we live in a country that's actually the state itself is very communistic in nature. It believes that it should provide all power to people, save people's lives, educate children. It's the government's responsibility. That's the mindset. It's the government's responsibility to empower children. It's the government's responsibility to increase the economy. But unfortunately, that is the furthest from sustainable practice that we can have, and is not the path to a strong nation.
And something that's interesting is the head of the World Economic Forum, not Klaus Schwab, is actually at this G20 summit. And he is saying that South Africa is standing poised to influence the world because we've overcome so many difficulties and that we can solve conflicts. I don't trust our government to solve any conflict. They can't even solve their own internal battles and issues. So for the World Economic Forum to believe that South Africa can play a huge role in resolving the world of Donald Trump, because that is the big concern for them right now, is that Donald Trump is disrupting the global order. And they believe South Africa can fight against this thunder, and it's absolutely impossible. Our government can't even look after the people here, and that's the focus of this article we're covering that's in Daily Investor.
Just remember, with this G20 guy, this head of the G20, he also mentions how mineral rich we are and how it's necessary for data centers and the fourth industrial revolution. And let's keep that in mind. We are an extremely wealthy country. We're just not managing our resources properly. Like, we are a water-rich country. We're just not managing water properly. So this plays into it. The article from Daily Investor says 1.5% of South Africans pay 61% of all income tax. So that's an interesting statistic. And this article goes into a lot of detail. The crux of the matter is government needs to become much smaller and more efficient. It needs to be incredibly smaller than what it currently is. And no one is actually really talking about that. And I think that's the frightening part. They're coming up with all kinds of ideas. This article's full of ideas. How can we get more tax from people? Instead of saying, how can we decrease the burden of government on all the citizens? That's not being discussed. It's not part of the conversation, whereas that's the only thing that matters, making government less of a burden. But here's some of the details.
I'm actually scared how some of the financial managers in the country have said that we can't reduce the size of government because many things will collapse, and that we need government workers to spend money within the fiscus. Are they absolutely insane? 978,140 to the last person, South Africans, or 1.5% of the population, pay 60.9% of all personal income tax, the government's biggest revenue generator. Now, it gets worse. Even more concerning is that only 235,000, which is about a quarter of that amount, or 0.4% of the population, pay 33% of all personal income tax. And, we're not going to burden you with all the details in the article, but towards the end, it makes a very important point. And you will get a link to this article in the description below the video, as well as in the first comment. The fact that 978,000 South Africans pay 60.9% of all personal income tax, and 235,542 pay 33% highlights a very important point. These taxpayers are worth gold to South Africa, even although many of them are treated like utter rubbish. Most South Africans are treated like rubbish. And these people fund most of government's social development and other projects. In other words, social development includes grants and many other things. However, they say, and this is the crux, wealthy people and their money are also very mobile. Should tax rates increase, the country could lose them and their tax contributions, which is obvious.
And
they
this
have been losing them.
This is why they're not talking about, the government is not specifying increasing income tax, but rather VAT, because that would
yes.
affect everybody. Unfortunately, though, the most vulnerable will
Also
suffer
be affected,
terribly.
yeah.
People will probably not be eating enough for their calorie intake every day.
Well, there's another big thing here, that the government is actually short of money. So it's 58 billion that they are short, and they are trying to find it somewhere, and they don't know where to cut. Well, they can start with the DRC, right?
Yeah.
How many billions for keeping troops in the DRC? Are they flipping serious? I mean, this is absolutely absurd.
Any aid to other countries should stop.
Other countries would be up in arms if they were in our situation, and the country was spending that amount of money to pay for our troops to be somewhere getting shot to death, getting pregnant.
It was proposed to cost around 5 billion, right?
Yes, 5 billion, 5,000 million to keep troops there. For whose interest, I ask you? So we have problems. It showed that the government needed to raise 58 billion in additional revenue in 2025-2026 to address its spending needs. Now, this government spending needs is like this bloated individual, they just need to feed themselves more and more. They can't help themselves anymore. Instead of getting on a treadmill and exercising, becoming lean.
You're saying the government's unfit.
Very unfit at this stage.
So I would love to, I don't know, I've never done the maths for this, but I'd love to know how much the government would save at local, provincial and national government if they just end all food. All the
that
food,
the politicians eat.
The lunch before parliament, the food that happens at every public participation, whatever, the food that happens at every gathering.
And all the fancy BMWs that all the ministers and deputy ministers, not just in our national government, but provincial parliament. You have all these people, a lot of people say it's just the ANC, it's nonsense. I have only mostly seen DA ministers being driven around from provincial parliament in these fancy vehicles with their security details.
It's unnecessary. Why does a provincial MPL need security?
Most people don't know that they have.
No one even knows.
And that they have 4 or 5 advisors that are paid for.
Yeah.
So people, we can cut a lot of cost. Yesterday we spoke of Adrian Masson, the chief editor in charge of News 24, actually saying something sensible for a change, that we can get rid of provinces. Mm-hmm. It's costing us a fortune. And we said 165 billion in bad expenditure in the past 5 years. So just getting rid of provinces, we're going to save a lot of money. So we need big decisions because the government is on the implosion phase now, where the building is starting to topple.
Yeah.
And
so the money
it's
that goes,
difficult to turn it
all
around.
the money that goes to provinces could rather be spent on physical infrastructure.
I mean, this is just one.
It's one
of many things that can happen. We have so many dead wood in government of people that's not actually efficient. And many of you might have seen in America where this Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE as they call it, have government workers crying, moaning, screaming, carrying on, because they are just being asked in an email to tell the government what they have done in the past week. 5 bullet points. Tell us what you've done in the past week, because they won't report to office. They're sitting at home earning a salary. Now, we should do the same thing here, and you've suggested that we need to send in teams that can make government efficient. Look at what's actually happening, and just cut. This is the kind of thing we need. And this is something you've proposed from a political perspective in the past. That's absolutely necessary.
Here's a quick one. This article mentions NGOs or social projects. I think a social project, an NGO that actually has worth, that's actually doing something good, will be not self-funded, but funded by the community, funded by society. If it's being funded by government, then it's just another leech. Yep. If it's doing good work, people will automatically put money behind it. So I envision a country where there's very little tax. There's various options I've looked at with regards to VAT versus tax versus VAT. But ultimately, there isn't a burden on the taxpayer, but then the taxpayer has more cash flow and they can choose to fund certain NGOs in the community if they are doing good work to solve social ills instead of leaving social ills up to government to solve.
You know, I look again at our spend in every tax rand.
Yeah,
20%, 20%, so 20 cents in every tax rand is going towards service delivery. And most of that is pilfered and pillaged and stolen through crooked grants. Then we have 60% going towards government wages. Wages, people, your tax money, my tax money, and then 20% towards the payment of the interest on our debt. And that's just getting worse. And they speak about our GDP ratio that's getting worse and worse year on year. So people, we need a new governance system. This is the bottom line.
Here's another, it's a place where government can save a little bit of money. It's not a lot of money, it's just a little bit of money. But if you stop political party funding, which is actually stipulated in the constitution that political parties will receive funding from the government. But if we stop that, it will save over 300 billion rand a year, which is quite a substantial amount.
Million,
it can be put
not
towards
billion.
Oh, million, sorry, yeah, million.
Yeah,
it's not as much as provincial government, for instance, but it's
politicians don't earn that much. Let me just make this clear. Cutting politicians is not the problem. It's the massive government that's created.
Administration.
Absolutely.
It's every department that has all their workers, assistants,
cronies,
advisors.
cater deployment, family and friends, etc.
I'd love to hear in the comments, what do you think should be our economic policy? How do you think government can cut their spending? And how do you feel specifically about getting rid of, not provincial borders, not provinces, but provincial government? Very big difference. How do you feel about getting rid of provincial government? Do you feel anxious about it? Do you feel like it will be a good thing? I'd love to hear your views and your thoughts, because I think this needs to be a very big talking point in South Africa very soon.